On a school day like any other, Haruka, true to his routine, remains isolated at his desk, the typical loner. He is well aware of his status, and in some ways, he even appreciates the silence that accompanies him. To him, it's far preferable to any interaction with his classmates, for whom he harbors overwhelming disdain. The classroom is divided into groups: the delinquents, the popular girls, the gym brothers, and, of course, the rest of the forgotten. Haruka, however, fits into none of these circles, and this exclusion suits him perfectly. The time he gains by being alone allows him to dive into his books, a peaceful escape from the uninteresting reality around him. But, as tranquility rarely lasts, his moment of introspection is abruptly interrupted by a bright light that appears beneath his feet. With a flash of recognition, he realizes that a summoning circle is forming. For a brief moment, his heart races. An Ice Sky adventure? Perhaps, after all, he is destined for something grand. However, excitement quickly gives way to suspicion. For a loner, he's receiving far too much attention. And if he's learned anything about Ice Skies, it's that things rarely end well for those who suddenly stand out without reason. A sense of panic begins to creep into his chest. Determined not to become yet another victim of this uncertain fate, especially before GTA 6 is released, Haruka acts quickly. With the portal still forming, he bolts toward the classroom door. However, his hopes are dashed when he finds the door sealed with magic. He pushes, pulls, punches, but nothing happens. The portal completes. His classmates start to disappear one by one, their bodies fading into thin air. Time is running out. In a last-ditch effort, Haruka tries a bold move. He climbs into the ceiling's ventilation ducts, hoping the summoning circle will lose sight of him. But just when he thinks he's escaped, the light pursues him, piercing through walls and ceilings. The inevitable happens. Haruka is pulled into another world. The sensation of failure and helplessness overwhelms him, and the bitter taste of defeat settles in. When Haruka opens his eyes, he expects to see an Ice Sky cliché, maybe a pompous king or a dazzling princess, begging for his help to save the kingdom. Instead, what he finds is a bald old man, pacing back and forth, agitated and visibly panicked. God, apparently. The nervous old man explains that he's already sent all of Haruka's classmates to the other world, but Haruka's escape attempt complicated everything, making his summoning a mistake. Now desperate, God needs to send him to the alternate world quickly before anyone discovers the fiasco. Haruka, who had thus far maintained a cynical air of resignation, begins to feel his patience wearing thin when God offers him abilities to help in this new world. But all the good abilities have already been chosen. What's left? Scraps. Skills so ridiculous they border on insulting: villager skills from Minecraft, gambling dice, magical contact lenses, and, to top it all off, a stick. And, as if the humiliation weren't enough, he's only allowed to pick a limited number of these mediocre abilities. Haruka's blood boils. He explodes, reprimanding the old god for putting him in such an absurd situation. However, God isn't about to tolerate the insolence of a mortal. He knows he messed up, but that doesn't mean he's going to let a cheeky teenager insult him. With a bored expression, he tells Haruka that, as compensation, he'll receive all the discarded skills. Without wanting to drag the conversation on any longer, he teleports Haruka to the other world instantly. Haruka crashes into reality with a thud. Sure, he has more skills than usual, but what good are they when he's been dropped directly into a dense, unfamiliar forest? He's never lived in the wild, and the lack of supplies makes him feel the creeping cold of vulnerability. However, as he scans the ground, he finds a bag, part of his villager skill. The bag allows him to store an infinite number of items. Inside, there are a few basic pieces of equipment. A small relief amid the desolation. After equipping himself, Haruka decides to check his stats. With the gambling dice in hand, he must roll them to determine his status points. The sense of uncertainty tightens in his stomach, but he has no choice. The dice roll on the ground, and he receives an M score. What does M mean? Unsure, he decides to allocate all the points to his luck stat. When he opens his status window, he sees that his luck is completely maxed out. A victory? Maybe. But instead of celebrating, Haruka sighs, lamenting not using the points on something more useful. As he explores his skills, he discovers that, aside from the useless ones, he gained 2 unique ones. Due to being such a loner on Earth, he will be unable to form parties in this new world, even if he wanted to. In exchange, his other skill allows him to force monsters to serve him, since, after all, he wouldn't be able to make friends. The bitter irony of this does not escape Haruka. The idea of never being able to form the dream Ice Guy protagonist harem frustrates him, but he has no time for trivial regrets. Though he feels tempted to search for his classmates, or at least for the logic of where their starting point should be, Haruka quickly dismisses the idea. He never cared about them before, and he certainly won't start now. His priority is survival. He needs supplies, but the forest around him is dense, dark, and filled with unseen dangers. The tension rises. He can barely see through the trees, and with each step, the possibility of encountering a lurking monster becomes more real. However, something clicks in his mind: the contact lenses. When he puts them on, the world around him transforms. Suddenly, he can see details that were previously hidden, with the ability to assess his surroundings. Thanks to this newfound vision, he navigates the forest, finding safe mushrooms to eat and storing them in his villager bag. After quenching his thirst at a nearby river, something catches his attention. Between the shadows of the trees, a small cave reveals itself. Haruka, always cautious, mutters a silent prayer, fearing he'll find some monster lurking inside. However, upon exploring the interior, he realizes the cave is empty. The place is spacious and, to him, perfect for becoming his temporary base. With a relieved sigh, Haruka sets up his tent and lights a magic lantern, filling the cave with a soft, comforting glow. He then uses his temperature control magic to light a campfire, keeping himself warm. To his surprise, the simple use of his magic unlocks a new fire skill. Additionally, his constant vigilance against monsters grants him various detection skills. Though Haruka has acquired a handful of skills, his only attack technique remains a mere stick. He still needs to figure out how to protect himself effectively. The next morning, he awakens with a start, his heart racing as if sensing imminent danger. Stepping outside the tent, the tension in his shoulders eases as he realizes no monster attacked him during the night. He's safe, but thanks, ironically, to the skill items he had so thoroughly despised. However, escaping monsters doesn't mean escaping his other relentless adversary, hunger. Without hesitation, he pulls out a frying pan and starts frying some of the mushrooms he had gathered the day before. And, if you're wondering, yes, the frying pan was stored in his villager's bag, along with a complete set of kitchen knives and a portion of dried meat. So far, this bag has been his greatest asset, something Haruka can't help but question: what kind of villager prepared this stock so well? Fed, he knows he needs to decide what to do next. Haruka leaves the cave, his steps slow, reflecting on his next moves. The cave, while a temporary shelter, isn't enough. He needs a constant food source and, more urgently, effective measures to protect himself from the monsters inhabiting this unfamiliar land. Fortunately, with his magical contact lenses, finding food becomes relatively easy. Right away, he spots more mushrooms and some herbs. But the problem of the monsters continues to haunt his thoughts. Suddenly, a cold sensation runs down his spine as his detection skill kicks in. Something is approaching. Determined but cautious, he follows the sound until he discovers the source: goblins. Not one, but 2, and both stronger than him. Haruka feels panic rising. He thinks about running, but the harsh truth is that if he wants to survive in this forest, he'll eventually have to face them. This is a reality that can't be avoided. He takes a deep breath, determined to strike while he still has the element of surprise. Despite his doubts about the effectiveness of his staff, Haruka enchants it with magic, hoping it will work. To his surprise, the result is far better than expected. With a swift motion, he leaps out of the bushes and strikes one of the goblins directly on the head. The powerful, precise blow stuns the monster, and Haruka takes advantage of the moment to continue the attack. Each hit is fierce, relentless, until the goblin succumbs. One down. But the other is coming. The second goblin charges, but now Haruka is in sync with the rhythm of the battle. The monster's movements are slow, predictable. He dodges easily and, with a mix of magic and brute force, takes down the opponent. His heart still races as he looks at the goblins' bodies, his first real victory in this world. Exhausted, he decides he's done enough for the day and returns to the safety of his cave. Back in his improvised shelter, Haruka prepares a modest dinner with the mushrooms he collected. While eating, he examines the club he took from the goblin. Though it's a powerful weapon, it's heavy and has a short reach, something that doesn't suit his combat style. He decides to stick with his trusty staff for now. Checking his stats, Haruka notices something unexpected. He's leveled up. Not only that, but all his stats have doubled. The sense of progress excites him, but the reality of his situation quickly brings him back down to earth. The next morning, the routine repeats. More mushrooms, more boredom. The craving for meat intensifies, almost becoming an obsession. However, to hunt, he needs to improve, and the first skill he plans to test is magic fusion, a newly acquired technique that envelopes his body in a layer of magic, boosting his physical and magical defenses and raising his strength to impressive levels. Haruka also decides to test his appraisal skill, now at level 2. However, when using the technique, he only finds a question mark next to the descriptions. He ponders for a moment about what it could mean, but soon gives up, frustrated. There's no time to waste on riddles. Out there, there's a forest to explore, monsters to defeat. As he steps out for his magic training, he finds yet another mushroom on the ground. A tired sigh escapes his lips. His hunger-crazed mind almost makes him believe that meat should grow on the trees in this bizarre world. With the mana infusion active, Haruka takes a step forward, but with the magical boost, he ends up launching several meters ahead, surprised by his own body's lightness. Each movement now feels precise, almost supernatural. He glides through the forest with ease, testing his newfound strength. With his confidence renewed, Haruka challenges 2 more goblins, defeating one with a single blow. The power flowing through his body is intoxicating. He thinks he can defeat more, maybe even a larger group. However, upon spotting 3 goblins together, his courage wavers. With common sense, he decides to retreat before biting off more than he can chew. Back in the cave, he continues with his routine. During the day, combat. At night, magical experiments. One of those nights, he discovers that he can shape coffee tables with his abilities. Eventually, he creates a magical gate for his cave, increasing the security of his shelter. With that, he finally feels ready to venture out at night, to hunt and, at last, satisfy his craving for meat. When he finally tracks down a rabbit, ready to savor his first meat meal in days, something in the distance catches his attention. His first thought is that more goblins are approaching, but upon closer observation, he realizes that fate has brought him something far more troublesome, his former classmates. The delinquents, the popular girls, the gym brothers, and even the nerds are there, scattered throughout the forest. Haruka hesitates. He hated being around them, but seeing them there, the sense of isolation becomes more real. He ponders for a brief moment, especially upon spotting the class representative, who had always been kind to him. Could he step out of his refuge and offer a simple hello? But soon, reason prevails. He has finally achieved the solitude he always longed for. A world without small talk, without the presence of people who annoyed him, without the pressure of social interactions. No, he won't ruin that. Resolved, Haruka chooses to ignore his classmates, opting for the path of solitude. He will conquer this world alone, with no one to interfere with his destiny. Haruka hid in the bushes, trying to stay invisible as the delinquents approached. One of them was convinced he had heard something coming from that direction, so he went to check. To Haruka's relief, all he found was a rabbit, and soon the group moved on. Feeling temporarily safe, Haruka decided to follow the delinquents, curious to see if they were up to something. He listened carefully, hoping to catch some useful information, but was soon disappointed. All the delinquents were having was a deep discussion about the class vice representative's chest. With no authority to stop them, Haruka was slightly worried about what the delinquents might do to the girls, but he was confident the class representative would handle things as she always did. However, things took a turn when he overheard them talking about using a connection with Tanaka, due to his abilities, to get whatever they wanted. Haruka realized they were planning something more serious. But intervening would mean talking to them, and he was firmly against any kind of social interaction. Back at his cave, he started grilling some mushrooms, but then it hit him: his loner skill had just leveled up. It was as if even his status screen acknowledged his isolation. It was probably because he avoided his classmates, but on second thought, it wasn't that bad. In fact, Haruka wanted to level up even more since his overall level was still stuck at 3. The problem was, 2 of his skills, Jack of all trades and useless skills, just wouldn't evolve. He didn't even know what those skills meant. Jack of all trades seemed simple enough, being competent in many areas but never mastering any specific craft. But useless skills intrigued him more. The best explanation Haruka could come up with involved puppetry, but that didn't make much sense to him. He decided to let the matter rest for now, focusing on his meal, though he still longed for a good piece of meat. Afterward, he called it a day and went to sleep. But fate wouldn't let him rest. In the middle of the night, a noise outside disturbed him. Reluctantly, he got up to investigate, expecting to find the delinquents causing trouble again. But what he saw was different. This time, it was the nerds. They were fighting a group of goblins and were clearly struggling. Haruka thought about helping them, but when he checked their stats, he saw that all of them were level 16, while he was barely at level 3. They would be fine without him. Still, before leaving, he noticed 2 goblins sneaking up behind them. The nerds were in trouble, and the memory of when they shared their holographic Charizard with him tugged at his heart. He decided they were worth saving. With a stick in hand, he stepped out of hiding and took down the 2 goblins with a single, precise hit. The nerds were surprised to see him, but quickly thanked him for the help. Haruka, however, found it hard to communicate. After all, it had been so long since he'd spoken to anyone. Even so, he led them back to his cave. The nerds were impressed by the interior, especially considering it was just a cave. Haruka awkwardly explained that he had learned some earth magic and crafting skills to fix the place up, but the nerds found it amazing that he had done it all by himself. While preparing a drink for the group, he asked why they were in the forest so late. The mood shifted, and after a brief pause, the nerds confessed they were fleeing from the rest of their classmates. After the class was transported to that world, chaos quickly set in. Strange skills were chosen, like mind control spells and the puppeteer ability, which the nerds had learned one of the delinquents possessed. The nerds were desperate to level up and protect themselves, especially after hearing the delinquents' plans to turn the girls into their puppets. They tried to warn the class representative, but soon the delinquents had leveled up enough to use their skills, with the vice representative as their main target. However, thanks to a surprise attack by the nerds, the delinquents were defeated, their abilities sealed, and they were expelled from the camp. That seemed like the end of the story, but the delinquents, spiteful as ever, attacked the camp while the nerds were away, burning everything down. When the nerds returned, they found only ashes, and to make things worse, the popular girls blamed them for the disaster. Fortunately, the class representative stepped in, reminding everyone that the nerds were the real reason the group had survived so far. The nerds appreciated the support from the class representative, but their patience with the camp had run out. Tired of their ungrateful peers, they decided to flee. After hearing the whole story, Haruka felt genuinely sorry for them and decided to do something special. He hosted a mushroom feast for that night. It was the first time in a long while that he truly enjoyed the company of others. But the next day, the nerds had to leave, ready to follow the river in search of a village and start their lives as adventurers. Before they left, they invited Haruka to join them, calling him a friend. He was touched but declined, believing his mediocre skills would only hold them back. Still, one concern nagged at him: the class camp, where the representative still was. She was the only person besides the nerds he actually liked. Determined to check on the situation, Haruka set off toward the camp. Along the way, he was attacked by a kobold, which bit him hard. Despite being wounded, he killed the creature and continued on. By nightfall, he arrived at the riverbank where the camp should have been, but it was empty. No sign of anyone. He assumed they had moved and used one of his detection skills to follow footprints until he found the popular girls. Of all people, the popular girls were the last ones Haruka wanted to see. He even tried heading back to his cave, but when he heard a desperate please, he stopped immediately. Please wasn't part of their vocabulary. Something serious must have happened. Reluctantly, Haruka approached them. The first thing they asked was if he knew where the nerds were. He hesitated, thinking they just wanted to complain about them again. However, the girls actually wanted to apologize. They now understood how much the nerds had done for them and felt sorry for having been so ungrateful. But the nerds had already left, and the girls, with no survival skills, were lost. Desperate, they begged Haruka to teach them how to survive in the forest. He was so surprised by the request that, without much thought, he agreed. As a result, his subjugation skill was activated, turning the girls into his obedient followers. From that moment on, they followed him wherever he went, defeating monsters and bringing him magic crystals like puppies waiting for approval. Haruka, however, wasn't pleased with how things had turned out. He preferred his solitude, and now the girls were relying on him for everything. When he noticed that one of them had a small injury on her arm, he handed her a healing potion he had prepared. But instead of using it on herself, she applied it to him. Annoyed by their exaggerated devotion, Haruka began to wonder how he would explain all of this to the class representative. As if by fate, she appeared at that moment, walking through the forest. As soon as the class representative catches Haruka's attention, he freezes. He has no idea what to say to her, and to make matters worse, he doesn't even know her name, despite all the years they've spent in the same class, ever since elementary school. She has always been kind to him, so when she realizes that he never bothered to learn her name, it's hard for her to believe. A few minutes later, the rest of the girls from the class arrive, practically all of them, except for the popular ones who were following the representative's orders. Speaking of which, the representative notices that the popular girls are standing behind Haruka, looking a little lost, and her first assumption is that he must have done something to them. He would like to say he did nothing, but the truth is that, even unintentionally, his ability ended up turning the girls into his servants, and he doesn't know what to do to fix it. Haruka tries to explain the situation as innocently as possible, but none of them seem to believe him. Exhausted, he turns to leave, but the representative stops him, insisting that he stays while she checks on Shimazaki. Fortunately, a small shake is enough to break the enchantment, and Shimazaki assures everyone that everything is fine. With that, Haruka thinks he can finally go, but the representative still wants to know how this whole subjugation thing happened, and she's not ready to let him off the hook so easily. As they argue, Haruka steps away and leans against a tree. With nothing better to do, he decides to practice his expansion magic for when he gets back home. He tries to create a basement, but he makes a mistake and ends up buried in the ground up to his neck. He remains trapped there, helpless, until the representative finds him, perplexed to see him in such a state after only asking him to wait for a few minutes. Boredom makes you do some crazy things, he thinks as she pulls him back to the surface. Finally free, she apologizes for not trusting him, especially now that Shimazaki clarified that he was only trying to help. Haruka doesn't recall promising to help anyone, but seeing that all the girls are thanking him, he decides to just accept the praise. With everything settled, he wants to head back home, but the girls aren't thrilled at the idea of being left alone in the forest. The representative hears Haruka mention that he has a house and asks about it. He explains that, with some free time, he managed to build a place to live. The girls are impressed. He managed to build an entire house, while they struggle to maintain a simple campsite. So, they call for an impromptu meeting. The representative asks how many people Haruka's house can accommodate, and he estimates that with a few adjustments, it could house around 200 people, maybe more if they remove some furniture and empty out the indoor pool. The representative feels a bit envious of how well Haruka is handling things, and though she doesn't like to impose, she asks if she and the other girls can stay the night, since they are all homeless at the moment. Haruka panics. Having a bunch of guy friends around is one thing, but a whole class of girls? After regaining his composure, he agrees and starts guiding them to his house. After so much time wandering in the forest, he navigates it with ease, helped by an ability that aids him in finding his way. Finally, when they arrive, the girls are amazed by Haruka's house. It's been so long since they had a roof over their heads, or even access to a proper bathroom, that as soon as he mentions where the bath is, they rush over, stripping without hesitation. There's no way Haruka can sleep in the same room as all of them, so he sets up a tent outside and prepares to spend the night there. As he tries to relax, the representative enters the tent to talk. She thanks him for all his help, confessing that ever since the nerds left and the Jim brothers decided to take off, things had been tough for them. But now, after a bath and a decent meal, the mood is much better. Still, the representative admits to feeling like a failure for not being able to protect the class on her own. Haruka thinks she's being too hard on herself. Considering that the nerds practically spent their whole lives preparing for this kind of situation, she shouldn't compare herself to them. This was the first time she'd even heard of Ice Guy, after all, so all things considered, she's doing quite well. Hearing this, the representative feels relieved, though Haruka's accomplishments, like building a house in a week, still seem hard to match. She wishes him a good night and heads back inside, but Haruka knows that after everything that happened today, falling asleep will be nearly impossible. The next morning, Haruka wakes up to one of the girls sitting outside his tent, asking him to get up because breakfast is ready. It takes him a moment to understand what's happening, but when he does, he protests that he still wants to sleep a little more. The girl doesn't accept that, jumping on top of him to force him out of bed. Defeated, he asks what's for breakfast. He was expecting the usual mushroom soup, but to his surprise, it's fish. He gets so excited that he accidentally headbutts the girl. She gets slightly hurt, but Haruka hardly notices, so happy is he to finally have something different to eat. The representative finds it funny that he's so excited about fish, considering he lives near the river. Haruka explains that despite that, he's terrible at fishing and has never caught any. Impressed by how efficiently the girls manage to catch fish, he asks to see their method, and the representative agrees, taking him to the river. One of the girls uses a lightning magic ability to electrocute the water, and several fish float up, ready to be collected. Haruka is impressed and asks her to repeat the trick. She hesitates but eventually gives in. This time, he uses his packaging ability to seal the lightning's energy, acquiring the magic for himself. Intrigued, the representative asks what Haruka did, and he explains that his packaging ability, combined with other skills, allows him to absorb magic. It could be useful, but he doesn't think it's that impressive since most of his abilities seem kind of pointless. While some girls play in the river, Haruka takes the opportunity to ask the representative about their plans. She says they intend to go to the nearest village and find the nerds, but they need to level up to face the dangers outside the forest. Haruka offers to train them before they head out, and they accept. Shortly after, the group is gathered in the forest. Haruka asks the girls to share their levels, and all of them are above level 15, which makes him feel a bit down for still being at level 7. To start the training, he challenges them to face a group of kobolds. The girls think it will be easy, since the kobolds are level 6, but moments later, all of them are on the ground, defeated. The girls manage to settle in, as Haruka's tent has the ability to expand. Even so, he still has no idea why they decided to gather there. After a brief debate, they return to the fight, confident that this time they will be victorious. Haruka is pleased to see the group's renewed motivation, but, to be honest, he doubts they will succeed. Before the girls set out, the same one who brought breakfast the day before approaches Haruka, wanting to apologize for her behavior. She admits that initially, she only got close to him to test if he would try to take advantage of the situation. At first, she didn't trust him, but after he offered shelter, food, and training, she began to believe that maybe he was trustworthy. Now, she promises to be there again the next morning, with breakfast ready. Haruka is happy with the change in her attitude and, since he doesn't know her name, he nicknames her Fish Girl. The next morning, Haruka is pleased to receive the fish brought by the Fish Girl. However, the calm doesn't last long, as he soon hears the other girls excitedly talking about facing the kobolds again, seeking revenge. Before they can rush off, the representative calls them back, stating that they need more training. Without it, defeat is certain. She suggests they start by practicing with goblins, but the battle against these creatures doesn't go as planned. Despite the defeat, some still believe they're ready to take on the kobolds, while others pretend to be sick to avoid more combat. Haruka has a bad feeling about this insistence, but is prepared to intervene if necessary. However, to his surprise, the girls show that they have learned from their mistakes in the fight against the goblins, joining forces to finally defeat the kobolds. The representative congratulates them on the victory, and Haruka feels relieved to see that they are starting to manage on their own. Perhaps, at last, he can return to his solitary life. But then, the representative approaches and thanks him for agreeing to accompany them to the nearest village. Haruka is sure he never agreed to this, but faced with her insistence, he ends up giving in. Shortly after, everyone has their things packed, ready to leave the forest. Haruka reminds them that they don't know what they might encounter out there, so everyone should stay alert. Meanwhile, in another part of the forest, one of the boys from the class is desperately running for his life. He makes the mistake of looking back and trips over a rock, ending up cornered. With nowhere to run, he is strangled to death by his pursuer. Haruka's top priority now is to keep the girls safe, as the delinquents will surely come after them. To achieve this, he needs to get them out of the forest as soon as possible. A little further ahead, he crosses paths with a gigantic orc and sees the perfect opportunity to teach the girls how to defend themselves properly. He warns them to stand aside and pay attention to how he will handle the situation. With an air of confidence, Haruka charges at the orc with his stick. The monster raises its club with the intent to smash it into the ground, but when it looks down, it realizes that Haruka has simply vanished. He is hiding behind a tree, and given the orc's slowness, it would be impossible for him to be hit. However, if Haruka wants to fight back, he will need to come up with a plan. He recalls the nerd saying that physical attacks are ineffective against orcs, so the safest option to defeat them is to use magic. He opens the status window to check if he has any magic available and sees that he has mastery over all elements, thanks to his special ability. But before he can cast any spell, the orc finds him and uses its club to destroy the tree where Haruka was hiding. With no other choice, he dodges the blows until, tired of evading, he suddenly appears behind the orc and knocks it to the ground with a single blow from his stick. The orc falls dead. Haruka is surprised. He didn't expect a physical hit to work so well. The girls, on the other hand, are frustrated because they didn't learn anything by watching the orc be defeated so quickly. Haruka apologizes, promising to use magic next time so they can really see how it's done. The next time he spots an orc, which is simply wandering around, Haruka prepares a fire spell in his hand and casually throws it at the monster's face. The orc collapses and doesn't get up again. The girls are even more annoyed, thinking they will never learn to defend themselves if he keeps killing everything in the blink of an eye. Later that night, the group enjoys orc meat and has a barbecue. While Adriana relaxes and enjoys the moment, Haruka keeps busy setting up traps to ensure they aren't attacked during the night. His tent, by the way, has a skill that prevents them from being detected by enemies. With that, he believes they are well protected. Still, he decides to plan the route they will take in the morning. Activating his maximum skill, he begins to examine the path ahead when suddenly his sharp perception alerts him to the presence of someone nearby. He goes to investigate and soon distinguishes 4 male figures emerging from the darkness. At first, he tenses up, thinking they might be the delinquents. But as the men get closer, Haruka realizes they are just the Gem brothers, and he feels an immediate relief since he won't have to fight them. Meanwhile, the WCK class was looking for Haruka and spotted him talking to the 4 guys from a distance. Even without apparent hostility, Haruka still wonders what the Gem brothers are doing there. He imagines they might be after the girls, but the guys vehemently deny this and say they actually came looking for him. Haruka decides to believe their story, although he doesn't understand why they were avoiding the girls. The Gem brothers then explain that they don't trust them and reveal a concerning piece of information. There is an ability even worse than charm and puppeteer that the delinquents wanted to use. Haruka remembers reading something about a hijack ability, and that's exactly what the Gem brothers are talking about. The delinquents spoke openly about everything they intended to do with their mind control abilities, but never mentioned anything about hijack. This can only mean that they don't have this ability. If neither the delinquents nor the nerds possessed it, then one of the girls probably has this ability and is keeping it a secret. With a mischievous smile, Haruka decides to tease the Gem brothers by hinting that he might be the one with the hijack ability, but the guys don't seem fazed by the provocation at all. They appear relieved, knowing that Haruka is so reserved that he would never go around looking for people to steal their abilities. Haruka then admits that he doesn't possess the hijack ability, although he has a subjugate ability that can turn people into his servants. He just prefers not to use it. The Gem brothers were there merely to warn him about the dangers of hijack, and before they head back into the forest to watch the suspicious delinquents, they ask Haruka to apologize to the class representative and the other girls on their behalf for having disappeared without warning. The next morning, everyone wakes up, and the girls seem much more cheerful than usual. Haruka, on the other hand, needs to distance himself because all this energy is draining his own. As he moves away, the class representative approaches with a nervous look, saying she has something important to confess. Hesitating, she reveals that she is the one who possesses the hijack ability. But Haruka has known this for a long time. After all, he has an appraisal ability. The representative is taken aback to discover that he was already aware since only the nerds knew about her secret. She asks why he never said anything and why he continued to help her even knowing. For Haruka, it simply wasn't a big deal. She questions whether he isn't afraid. After all, hijack is an ability that allows someone to steal another person's abilities by killing them. Anyone would be terrified of that. But once again, Haruka sees no reason for concern. The nerds probably weren't worried either since they knew about the ability, and although they had sealed the delinquent's charm and puppeteer abilities, they left the representative with hijack. This can only mean that, at the very least, they trust her not to abuse that power. Haruka feels the same way, as he is sure she would never kill anyone. Touched by Haruka's trust, the representative lets a few tears escape. He finds it funny, considering she has been crying quite a bit in recent days, but she quickly blames him for being the reason behind so many tears. The group continues through the forest, and after traveling a good distance, Haruka announces that everyone can take a break. He pulls out a juice box and offers to sell it to the girls, but since none of them have any money, one girl suggests paying in another way in exchange for the juice. The class representative quickly intervenes, leaving the girl without the juice. After this brief pause, they resume their journey. They are ahead of schedule, but it will still be dark before they reach the village, which means another night camping. It is then that Haruka spots a nearby river and sees the perfect chance to try something out. He asks the representative to take care of the other girls while he goes to explore. She offers to accompany him, but Haruka wants to do this alone, so he sets off before she can follow him. Running through the forest, he activates his magic boost ability to strengthen his body and casts a gravity spell to become lighter. With this combination, he moves faster than ever and believes that with enough force, he might even be able to fly. He decides to test the theory and jumps high into the sky. At first, it seems to be working, but he soon starts to fall, and before he realizes it, he crashes into the forest floor. He narrowly avoids dying from the fall, so he decides not to try that again and heads back to camp. When the representative sees him all bruised, she panics and asks what happened. Haruka explains that he launched himself high up, but gravity insisted on bringing him back down, and he almost died in the fall. She starts to scold him, calling him reckless, but to try to lighten the mood, Haruka mentions that at least he spotted some fruits from up there and offers to make juice for her. The representative declines, but the juice girl appears once again, insisting on getting the drink. The next day, they continue their journey, and everything seems calm, except for one girl who got lost and the orcs that crossed their path. Despite these obstacles, the group finally manages to exit the forest. The girls are ecstatic to be free from that place, knowing that the village is not far away. But Haruka remains on alert, as they feel exposed in the open. The hills block his view, preventing him from seeing the exact location of the village. He then opens his status window to check if there is any ability that could help, and to his surprise, he discovers a new skill, walk on air. It seems he acquired it after his disastrous attempt to fly the day before. He decides to test it, and to his surprise, he begins to walk on air. The representative notices that Haruka has disappeared and starts looking for him until she spots his figure floating in the air. Haruka looks down with a smile and says he just wants to explore a bit to ensure everything is safe. The path ahead seems secure. He observes from a distance, and at first glance, everything appears peaceful, but he soon notices a group of villagers being attacked by wolves. He descends and tells the class representative that he didn't see much beyond a few people being attacked. The representative believes they need to help them, but just because they are being attacked by monsters doesn't mean they are good people. All the girls think they should run to save the villagers, but at this distance, none of them would make it in time, even if they ran. And what if the people turn out to be bandits or something similar? Haruka doesn't want to take risks that could put the group in danger. Therefore, he suggests that they just ignore the situation and keep moving forward. He starts to walk away, but the representative grabs his arm and pleads for him to reconsider. She says that if the people are bandits and try to attack them, she will fight them, but if they are good people, she wants to save them. Haruka already knew the class representative would be determined to help others, even if it put her in danger, but given the current situation, the girls are still terrible at combat and couldn't do much to help, even if they wanted to. So, Haruka decides he will handle the situation on his own. The people are too far away for him to run over there, and even if he tried to use the weight magic from yesterday, he probably still wouldn't be able to make it. So, he decides to try something new. He activates Magic Boost and the weight magic on himself, as if he wants to put the finishing touch with a powerful wind spell to act as propulsion. The spell is so strong that it ends up enveloping the class representative, but Haruka doesn't notice, so he takes off toward the villagers, using the walk-on-air ability to stay suspended. As he flies, Haruka feels something gripping his cloak and turns around, shocked to see the class representative hanging onto him, terrified. She explains that she was sucked up by the wind spell and that they are now too high for her to let go. Thus, she ends up accompanying him on the adventure. When they approach the villagers, the representative asks Haruka to stop, but he never really thought about how to stop, so they end up landing in the middle of the battle between the villagers and the wolves. As a result, the representative faints, all the wolves are instantly eliminated, and the people are left in total disbelief. While the representative is still unconscious, the leader of the group thanks Haruka for saving them and introduces himself as Ofter, while his friend is named Gayak. If Haruka hadn't shown up, Ofter's entire group could have been exterminated, so he is truly grateful. Hera asks what they are doing there, and Ofter and Gayak explain that wolves have been attacking merchants on the plains, and the Adventurers Guild made a request to exterminate the wolves. They thought they could handle the situation at first, but they were soon overwhelmed. Their cart was destroyed, so they will have to carry everything back to the village by hand. And since there isn't much for Haruka to do until the rest of the girls arrive, he decides to share some roasted mushrooms he carries for emergencies. Gayak is surprised that Haruka is sharing something like that with them since they are stamina mushrooms, extremely rare, as they restore a person's stamina almost instantly. Soon, the rest of the girls from the class arrive, all excited to meet the group of elves and women from the night, and everyone gets along well. Ofter offers to guide them to the town he came from, and soon the group arrives in the town of Omu, thrilled to finally be back in civilization. Meanwhile, in the forest, the delinquents have leveled up significantly in the past few days, and now that they have accumulated a good amount of experience, they plan to go after the girls and take revenge. However, before doing that, they need to unlock their puppeteer and charm abilities, so they will go after the nerds first. Meanwhile, back in the forest, the delinquents have been leveling up in recent days, and, full of accumulated experience, they plan to go after the girls for revenge. But before that, they need to unlock their puppeteer and charm abilities, so they decide to hunt down the nerds first. In the city, the girls run excitedly through the streets, amazed by everything civilization has to offer. However, the class representative reminds them that they're out of money and still have a lot to accomplish. She tries to gather all the girls, while Haruka, observing the scene with a smile, feels that his job there is done, which means he can return to his peaceful, solitary lifestyle in the forest. The class representative, unsuccessful in trying to organize the group alone, asks Haruka for a little help. But he's already relaxing in the shade, relieved that he's fulfilled his role. Annoyed, she understands his relief, but reminds him there's still much to be done. With a whistle, she calls all the girls over and explains her plan. First, they'll all go to the Adventurers Guild to sell the items they collected along the way. Then, they'll register with the guild and rent a room at an inn. During this, they can ask if anyone has seen the nerds passing by recently. Although the plan is good, the popular girls take offense at the representative treating the nerds as a side quest. She apologizes, but Haruka teases the popular girls for caring so much about them, eliciting discreet laughs. Shortly after, the group arrives at the Adventurers Guild, a place far more intimidating than Haruka expected. Everyone inside is already eyeing them with hostility, and he senses that entering won't be pleasant. But then an employee approaches and informs him that the guild master wants to speak with him. Foreseeing bad news, Haruka asks the representative to register everyone while he heads upstairs, mindful of the even more intimidating stairs on the upper floor. At the end of the hallway, he meets Georgitech, who leads him to the guild master's office. To his surprise, the intimidating-looking man only thanks him for saving Ofter and his group. After the meeting, Haruka goes down and notices a counter where it seems possible to sell magic stones. When he approaches the attendant and confirms this, he empties a pile of stones from his bag. However, before he can finish unloading, the attendant asks him to stop. He's already provided enough to give her 2 extra days of work. She asks him to return the next day as she needs time to finish the evaluation. Haruka doesn't mind waiting and hurries to register as the girls have completed their adventurer signups. But upon entering the registration room, his excitement quickly fades. After the evaluation, the guild employee informs him he's too weak to become an adventurer. The guild requires adventurers to be at least level 10, and in a qualified group, solo adventurers need to be level 20. However, Haruka is only level 9 and possesses a reed skill that prevents group formation. In short, he'll be unemployed for quite some time. Later, the class representative takes everyone to the inn reserved by the guild, but Haruka starts sweating nervously, noticing that the place seems, well, like a love hotel. To his relief, it wasn't what it seemed, and they all bid each other good night, heading to their rooms. The next morning, they meet at the diner for breakfast, and the class representative, excited, says the city is known for being very safe, so everyone is free to explore. The girls beam with excitement and start planning shopping trips. Seeing that they can manage on their own, Haruka decides he'll return to the forest as soon as he's paid for his crystals. Right after breakfast, he heads to the guild to check if the appraisal is ready. Upon arrival, he is greeted with sincere apologies. They don't have enough money to pay him all at once. The guild master himself appears to apologize and asks if Haruka would accept payment in installments. Haruka agrees, and the master thanks him for his understanding but hands him the value of the stones already appraised, 8 million eras. From what he and the class representative have learned since arriving in Omu, the currency here has practically the same value as money on Earth. In other words, Haruka has just gotten rich. The amount is so high because he brought more Fank stones than the guild had ever seen and even defeated those green wolves, which increased the value. With a small fortune in hand, Haruka decides to do some shopping before returning to the forest. G takes him to a place he thinks Haruka will like. However, Haruka feels they're heading to a rather adult location. But, to his disappointment, GAC only takes him to a rundown weapon shop. The shop collects special dungeon equipment, and since Haruka is a unique case, Godlike thinks it's the ideal place for him to get gear. The place looks suspicious, but Godlike assures him that the items are of the highest quality. Haruka trusts him but still wants to test a few things before buying. The items might look odd, but their effects are incredible, so he spends the entire day browsing and buying as much as he can afford. At one point, he notices an interesting necklace, but the only description his appraisal skill offers is support 7. Thinking back, Haruka recalls receiving the same message when assessing his villager set, so he decides to ask the seller what support 7 means. The seller explains that, in the case of the necklace, it can combine the effects of up to 7 items and allows the wearer to use them simultaneously. This seems extremely useful for Haruka, and if the effect also applies to his villager set, it means he'll be able to stack even more effects on his equipment. Excited, he begins to organize all the items to choose the best effects to combine, but at that moment, the class representative appears and starts shouting at him for staying out so late. Haruka realizes that he has indeed been there for hours, but he still has many items he wants to test. While holding one of the items, it suddenly starts to react, and before he knows it, all the items in front of him merge into one. The seller, obviously furious, points out that Haruka hasn't paid for anything yet, and all those items cost well over 10 million. Haruka panics because he doesn't have that much money, so GAC pleads with the seller to accept the 8 million that Haruka has. The next day, Haruka is devastated that he has spent all his money and is now completely broke. He wishes he could go out to collect more crystals, but no one can leave the city to hunt monsters without being registered as an adventurer. He even tried to sneak out with some girls, but the class representative caught him and started yelling at him again. Haruka then devises a perfect plan to sneak out without her noticing. His villager cloak has been combined with an invisibility cloak, so with that, he should be able to leave the city unnoticed. He stealthily passes by the class representative and the other girls, even feeling a twinge of guilt for leaving without telling them. Surely they would try to stop him if they knew. Haruka escapes from the inn and, once outside, makes the rash decision to remove the invisibility cloak. As he tries to jump over the wall, he is seen by some girls who are outside, and they ask where he's going. Startled, Haruka ends up hitting his groin against the wall, falls to the ground, and yells at the girls for scaring him like that, but they say they only wanted to know why he was jumping over the wall. He recognizes them as part of the athletic group but notices that one of them is missing. With his perception skill, he locates her and, to his horror, discovers that she is about to undress in the middle of the street. Haruka and the athletic girls rush to stop her, and even though they manage to get there in time, Haruka's escape plans are ruined. Haruka offers to join the group on a guild mission, but the class representative refuses without hesitation, still resentful that he tried to abandon them the day before. She assures him they'll be back soon, and Haruka agrees to wait for them, but as soon as they leave the city, he smiles contentedly, as he had already planned something else. Learning from the mistake of the previous day, he keeps his cloak on until he is outside the gates before removing it. Now that he has officially managed to leave, nothing is stopping him from returning to his home in the forest. As he runs, he spots destroyed buildings in the distance but decides to ignore them. No matter how interesting a side quest it could be, he just wants to go home. Along the way, he also encounters a horde of goblins that would be a great source of experience, but he passes right by them. However, he soon comes across a carriage being attacked by bandits. The people inside desperately call for help, but he hesitates. But before he can move away, the bandits intercept him. Reluctantly, Haruka tries to explain that he doesn't want to get involved, but they attack him, forcing him to retaliate. With a single fire spell, he takes out the enemies. His staff, a combination of items he recently obtained, proves to be powerful. The bandits, stunned, hesitate, and Haruka warns them to leave while they can. Still, they scoff, believing he's only good at magic, and decide to attack him up close. Haruka, however, knocks each one down with a single blow. Shocked, the bandits ask what his occupation is. This bothers him, as he is unemployed. The bandits decide to check his level, and upon seeing he's only level 9, they conclude they can defeat him using their weapon skills, which are unlocked only at level 20. Knowing how powerful they are, Haruka feels a bit anxious. They begin to use their skills, but as they shout the names of their attacks, Haruka easily dodges until they all collapse from exhaustion. At that moment, a girl approaches him, and he senses that yet another inevitable side quest is about to begin. She introduces herself as Marielle, from a noble family, and thanks him for helping her. However, she reminds him that he tried to ignore her at first and isn't sure if she should really thank him. Still, she asks him to accompany her back to the city, fearing for her safety, and mentions a reward, which convinces Haruka to agree. Along the way, Marielle asks where he came from, and Haruka starts complaining about the horrible city he just left, mentioning the guild that didn't have money to pay him, the fact that they didn't register him as an adventurer, and the guards who wouldn't let him leave without permission. Marielle, realizing which city he's describing, starts to cry, surprised and disappointed. Only then does Haruka realize that she is the daughter of the Lord of Omu, and with that, he understands that the carriage is heading back there. He regrets having agreed to escort her. Meanwhile, back in the forest, the Jim brothers and the delinquents prepare for battle. The Jim brothers refuse to let the delinquents harm the girls. The leader of the delinquents doesn't hesitate to attack the Jim brothers, but the moment he raises his sword, he is stabbed in the back. Both the Jim brothers and the delinquents are in shock at what they see. But when the other delinquents try to avenge their friend, the first one to attack is also stabbed. The last two decide to charge together to increase their chances, but the unknown assailant easily takes them down. The Jim brothers realize they're outmatched and try to escape, but the aggressor is too fast for them. He appears in front of them and begins to approach menacingly. Meanwhile, Haruka is being pulled back to the city by Marielle, who insisted he accompany her, even against his will. She began to cry, and to be polite, he decided to give in. Once they arrive at the Lord's house, Marielle leaves him alone for a moment, and he takes the chance to look around. The house is comfortable, but it has nothing to do with him, so he starts heading towards the exit. However, before he can leave, Marielle returns, annoyed to see him trying to go, as she had asked him to wait while she changed. She asks him to wait a bit longer because she has something to thank him with, and, albeit reluctantly, Haruka ends up staying. He didn't want to stay, but upon seeing the feast Marielle prepared, his attitude changes. She prepared it as a gesture of gratitude, but soon grows irritated when she realizes Haruka is more focused on the food than on her. So, she asks one of her maids to bring the rest of Haruka's reward, a bag of money. He recognizes the bag, but doesn't seem too excited. As a bonus, Marielle noticed that he wasn't registered in the city and arranged for a custom ID card, allowing him free entry and exit. It's an amazing gift, but Haruka has already stopped paying attention after receiving the money and is more interested in the dessert. The next day, the class rep and the other girls question him about the previous night. Haruka explains he was simply called to the local lord's mansion. She knows he's not lying, but doesn't understand why the lord wanted to see him. Haruka decides to keep the story vague so they don't find out he met Marielle during an attempted escape. Eventually, the girls drop the subject and decide to head out on a mission. Before they leave, the rep reminds Haruka that he can't leave the city. He agrees, appearing strangely obedient, but only because he knows nothing will prevent him from leaving with his new ID card as soon as they're gone. Before leaving, Haruka takes care of a few things. He uses the money to buy new equipment, enjoys a good meal, and leaves a note for the rep so she doesn't get upset about his departure. He writes that he's heading back to the forest to check on the Jim brothers, a cover story, but also a genuine concern. He presents his ID card and leaves the city without issue, determined not to be sidetracked by side quests this time. Soon, he returns to the forest and is relieved to see that everything is as he left it. He can't wait to get back home, but while he's distracted, an orc appears and tries to crush his head. Luckily, Haruka's attributes are too high for the attack to hurt him, and he defeats the orc with a single blow from his staff. The orc's appearance here is strange, as these creatures usually stay in the deeper areas of the forest. And that's not the only unusual thing. He finds a trail of human blood. He knows the blood can't be from the nerds, who are too strong to fall here, so he assumes it must belong to one of the Jim brothers. Following the trail, he finds the Jim brothers injured under a tree. At first, he thinks they're dead, but as he gets closer, he sees they're still breathing and uses all the healing potions he has until they regain consciousness. The Jim brothers begin explaining everything, and Haruka, who thought they'd been attacked by the delinquents, is shocked to learn that all the delinquents are dead. He asks if the nerds were also attacked, but the Jim brothers don't know, though they find it unlikely since the nerds left the forest some time ago. Noticing that Haruka intends to confront the person responsible, the Jim brothers warn him that Tanaka is insanely powerful now. They barely lasted a few seconds against him. Additionally, Tanaka stole all their powerful weapons, making himself even stronger. They suspect Tanaka had been planning this from the start, ever since they were teleported to this place, and they know who his next target will be. Of all the remaining students, the most likely target is the class rep, because of her hijack skill. Haruka considers this possibility, but only the rep, married, and he himself knew about this skill, so he wonders how the information leaked. The Jim brothers found out because Tanaka kept asking about the rep, and, as they couldn't give him the answer he wanted, they were beaten nearly to death. Knowing that Haruka is strong enough, they hope to stand a chance if they fight together, but Haruka doesn't know if he really wants to get involved in a battle like this. He's always avoided side quests, but if the class rep is being targeted, he has no choice. He needs to put a stop to it. He's clear with the Jim brothers, this is a battle he'll face alone. They try to talk him out of it because going alone is insanely risky, but when they see the determination in Haruka's eyes, they understand he's serious and agree. He tells them to head back to the city, meet up with the girls, and while they're there, to apologize to the rep for leaving the group earlier. As soon as the Jim brothers leave, Haruka thinks that having help in the fight might be advantageous, but he can't risk everyone in the battle at once. If Tanaka defeated them, no one would be left to warn the girls. The best option is to go alone and ensure he's prepared for the confrontation. In the village, the class rep is very worried, noticing that Haruka has left the city, but the other girls calm her, saying he will surely come back. In the forest, Haruka is already thinking about how to face Tanaka. The Jim brothers told him that Tanaka has extremely powerful weapon skills. Even the weapon skills of regular bandits are frightening, but Haruka has learned that once a skill animation starts, it can't be cancelled. If Tanaka tries to use a skill against him, Haruka knows he has to exploit this weakness. Suddenly, he notices several goblins drawn by the blood of the Jim brothers. These goblins are high level, so Haruka eliminates them to gain experience, but still can't level up. He wants to face something stronger to earn more points, and as if by magic, a Goblin King appears. He prepares to take it down. The Goblin King is powerful, its attacks fast, but Haruka dodges at the last second. A single strike from the creature could be fatal, and he doesn't have time to counter without getting hurt. He decides to use his teleport skill to combine multiple abilities into a new one. With this newly created skill, he slips past the Goblin King and defeats it in an instant. But as he celebrates, a terrifying presence appears behind him. Now he has to brace himself for another fight. This time, it's a Goblin Emperor, level 50, while Haruka is still level 9. He knows he can't win against this creature head-on, so he uses his combined skill again and charges forward. As he gets close, he attacks with all his might, but it has no effect. The Goblin Emperor stands as if nothing happened and attacks Haruka with incredible speed. He realizes the goblin is using weapon skills, as the strikes are too strong. Haruka finds an opening in the middle of the skill animation and counterattacks. He hits the goblin's chest, sending it flying back, but it starts healing immediately. Haruka realizes that normal attacks won't work and tries to create another combined skill. But before he can, the Emperor uses a powerful weapon skill, launching deadly slashes. Haruka barely manages to block, and, injured, knows he must keep fighting if he wants to become strong enough to protect his friends. He gets up and, in a desperate attempt, charges the Goblin Emperor. When the sun rises, Haruka is the last one standing, and for his victory, he levels up twice, reaching level 11. Back at his home, he checks his new skills. He doesn't know if they'll be enough to defeat Tanaka, but at least now he has a trick to attack at the right moment, exploiting weapon skill animations. He hopes it will be enough. Later, outside Haruka's house, Tanaka appears, and he was expecting him. He recalls Tanaka being intimidated by the Jim brothers when they arrived, but now sees it was all part of a plan for final revenge. As Tanaka and Haruka face off, the girls return to the city after a long day of adventures and soon find the injured Jim brothers. The class rep sees Haruka's note saying he went to check on the Jim brothers, so she asks if they know where he is. They reply that Haruka is in the forest, fighting to protect everyone. In the forest, Tanaka is disappointed to see Haruka is the only one there since he really wanted to find the class rep. He even used the delinquents to cause trouble and split the group. Haruka now understands that Tanaka was responsible for everything, and Tanaka admits he's willing to kill as many as necessary to get what he wants. He ignores Haruka and decides to go after the class rep to steal her hijack skill. Even though Haruka doesn't have much affection for his classmates, he wants to protect them. Raising his staff to Tanaka's neck, he declares, "You're not going through." Tanaka, irritated to have someone like Haruka in his way, is more than willing to kill him if that's what he wants. Tanaka creates a shockwave and charges at Haruka, who raises his hands to defend himself. Before leaving Whiterun, he noticed that only weak abilities remained in his skill panel, but even without knowing exactly what abilities Haruka possesses, Tanaka is confident that he is superior. Using magic, he summons several stones and hurls them at Haruka. Haruka tries to defend himself, but Tanaka seizes the opportunity and uses a metal-based ability to restrict his movements, immobilizing him for a moment. Haruka barely manages to dodge before the stones crush him. He can still move, but at a slower pace due to Tanaka's ability, which he uses to create crystal spikes under Haruka's feet. Haruka jumps from side to side to avoid the spikes, but he knows he won't be able to keep this up for long. With a disdainful smile, Tanaka commends Haruka for surviving this far, but before finishing him off, he wants to know when Haruka began to suspect his intentions. Haruka replies that he had been suspicious from the start, as something was always off about Tanaka's interactions with delinquents. Tanaka is impressed by Haruka's instincts, but now it's Haruka's turn to ask, when did Tanaka start planning this betrayal? With pride, Tanaka responds that it was from the very beginning. He admits it was a setback to see the class representative obtain the control ability instead of him, but upon gaining the metal ability, he realized that, with a good plan, he could still come out on top. At that moment, Tanaka uses magic roots to bind Haruka to the ground, and with him immobilized, he launches a massive fireball to consume him. Tanaka believed this would end it, but to his surprise, Haruka absorbs the magic and emerges unscathed. Haruka wasn't sure his plan would work, but he's grateful to have fused a magic-absorbing vine into his staff. While Tanaka is still in shock, Haruka advances and attacks, but Tanaka quickly summons a sword to block him. He's still stunned that Haruka blocked his fire magic, but he reminds himself that magic isn't his only weapon. He has so many at his disposal that he can barely choose which one to use to finish Haruka, so he decides to use them all. Tanaka launches a relentless assault, mixing blows and abilities against Haruka, who struggles to defend himself, eventually being caught off guard and flung away into some bushes. When he gets up, Tanaka delivers a devastating attack, sending Haruka sprawling across the forest floor. Haruka survives, but he's exhausted and out of breath as Tanaka approaches, giving him a smug look. As much as he hates to admit it, Haruka feels he's close to the end. Observing Tanaka's attacks and abilities, Haruka suspects he's been copying his classmates' abilities using the mimic skill. Tanaka is surprised that Haruka figured it out, and, having already admitted it, Haruka deduces that he intends to steal the class representative's control ability to take all the original abilities. This would make him the most powerful of all. Tanaka resumes his attack, now with a scythe, and Haruka barely withstands the impact. With no other options, Haruka tries to surprise him with an attack, but realizes Tanaka only used an illusion to mislead him. When nothing seems to work, Haruka appears to give up, standing still as Tanaka charges at him with a sword. At the last second, Haruka dodges and whispers in Tanaka's ear that he's uncovered his secret. Confused, Tanaka notices that Haruka now easily evades his attacks, and Haruka explains that he allowed Tanaka to attack repeatedly to find a weakness. Watching him, Haruka noticed that he never used the same ability more than twice, suggesting a limit on his copied abilities. If he just keeps dodging long enough, Tanaka will run out of abilities. Tanaka, now anxious, realizes Haruka has exposed his weakness, but still believes he can defeat him before his abilities are depleted. However, when he attempts to attack, Haruka leaps away, ready to turn this discovery into a final advantage against Tanaka's meticulous plan. Haruka has already adapted to Tanaka's speed. Now, no matter how many abilities Tanaka throws at him, Haruka won't be caught off guard. Spotting an opportunity, he charges at Tanaka to land a final blow while he's still disoriented, but is forced to retreat when Tanaka fires a last-minute laser beam. Even knowing Tanaka's hidden weakness, Haruka doesn't underestimate his strength. Tanaka, on the other hand, is exhausted, but he stands up, shouting that he'll never allow himself to lose to someone like Haruka. Though he may be at a disadvantage now, he still has one last trick up his sleeve. Tanaka then starts moving erratically through the forest, leaving Haruka dizzy from the speed and unpredictability of his movements. By the time Haruka understands what he's up to, it's already too late. Tanaka has unleashed his deadly ability. Haruka collapses, and Tanaka laughs triumphantly over his body, pleased with his victory. Tanaka admits he used up nearly all his stored abilities, but he doesn't care since once he kills the others and takes the control ability, he'll have as many permanent abilities as he desires. He then kicks Haruka in the head and starts to walk away, but is stunned to hear Haruka's voice behind him, saying it's rather rude to step on someone's head without apologizing. Tanaka can't believe Haruka is still alive. The deadly ability should have been unbeatable for anyone above level 11. But Haruka reveals that he has an ability that makes him resistant to negative effects, and by sheer luck, he drew a double M as soon as he arrived, maximizing his resistance. Haruka confesses that he only fell to the ground for dramatic effect, thinking it would be funny. Unamused, Tanaka demands to know how Haruka is even able to move, as he had used a metal ability to restrict his movements from the start of the fight. Haruka admits that, yes, the metal ability is indeed troublesome, and he hasn't actually been able to move his body since then. But he possesses a puppet skill and has been using it to control his own body externally this entire time. Furious, Tanaka refuses to accept that he's losing to someone with seemingly trash abilities and attacks Haruka wildly. Haruka dodges with ease, warning him that if Tanaka keeps this up, he'll end up exhausting his abilities. Ignoring the warning, Tanaka tries again, but Haruka emerges unscathed and faces him, saying his reign of terror has come to an end. Desperate, Tanaka tries to understand how this could have happened. He calculated everything to ensure his victory. Haruka replies that Tanaka's way of thinking is limited. After all, those laws of logic and math may make sense on Earth, but here things work differently. Tanaka was always the prodigy in school, surrounded by classmates he considered insignificant, dreaming of the end of that monotony. His wishes were granted when they were transported to this world. As soon as he saw the ability panel, he did the math to figure out the most exciting way to live, concluding that he had to kill everyone and take their abilities. As insane as that sounds, he'll never let someone like Haruka interfere with his plans. Tanaka launches his final attacks, but it's clear he's out of options. Haruka sees this and prepares to finally defeat him, but just as he's about to strike, a sword pierces his shoulder from behind. Tanaka laughs, revealing that he also has the power to control weapons from a distance. With Haruka bleeding and on his knees, Tanaka keeps attacking with his sword, ready to claim his ultimate victory. But in one last move, Haruka uses his staff to strike Tanaka, throwing him back. Although Tanaka planned every step, he always relied on powerful abilities that spared him from learning to adapt, unlike Haruka, who always had to improvise. That's why he will lose. Tanaka attempts one last strike, but Haruka is ready and defeats him with an improvised ability. Tanaka falls, mortally wounded. Haruka has won, but the battle has left him seriously injured, and as soon as he relaxes, pain hits his body with full force. All the energy spent on his abilities has completely drained him, leaving him on the verge of collapse. However, before he hits the ground, he's caught by the nerds. Haruka feels relieved to see them but wishes they had arrived sooner to help in the fight. They apologize for the delay but are there to support him now. Grateful, Haruka asks how they knew where he was. The nerds explain that the class representative found them after they left the dungeon and told them about the fight. Without hesitation, they rush to help. As they return to the city, they're greeted by the girls, who wait eagerly at the gate. They're concerned and tell him they've prepared a celebration in Haruka's honor. He feels uncomfortable with so much attention, but the leader of the Gem brothers appears to greet him and, without a word, simply gives him a gesture of camaraderie. The girls suggest everyone head back to the inn as the baths are ready and they can all finally relax. Meanwhile, the popular girls apologize to the nerds, surprising them with this humble gesture, and sincerely thank them for everything they've done. Now that everything seems resolved, Haruka believes there's no reason to stay and begins to leave, eager to return to his life in the forest. But before he can disappear, the class representative sees him and asks where he thinks he's going. She was worried he might die in the fight, and now that he's back, she doesn't want to see him leave again. Haruka apologizes, and she says it's all right, as long as he doesn't try to leave them again. This time, they'll all be keeping an eye on him, so sneaking away won't be an option. The next day, Haruka wakes up from a strange dream, shaking off the odd feeling as he heads downstairs. There, he's greeted by the nerds, who seem unusually excited. They are ready to explore the dungeon again, something they've been doing frequently. Curious, Haruka asks why they're so dedicated. The nerds explain that they are hunting for a rare item, something so special it could change everything. Intrigued, he asks what exactly this item does, and the answer is straightforward: it's to create our own harem. Haruka raises an eyebrow as the nerds explain that despite being there for almost a month, no BTY has shown up. The harem ray, it seems, would solve that once and for all. For them, it was the perfect solution. For Haruka, it was just another reminder of how badly he wanted to avoid these situations. He sighs. A harem invasion might sound interesting, but he doesn't need that. He just wants to return to his peaceful, solitary life. Unfortunately, peace is far from his reach. Someone has decided to complicate his life, and that person looks visibly irritated. Haruka freezes as he spots the class representative marching toward him. He gulps and asks why she's so angry. Although he had already been scolded by other girls the day before, she hadn't had her chance to confront him personally. Wasting no time, she starts lecturing him for risking his life in something so dangerous without taking her along, completely ignoring the fact that he only got involved to avoid problems like her. Haruka quickly apologizes, trying to end the lecture. He promises to let her know next time he plans to risk his life, even though he has no intention of doing so. Satisfied, the representative turns and walks away, leaving Haruka on the ground, dazed. How the hell had he let things get to this point? While reflecting, an absurd idea pops into his mind. What if I used the harem ray on all of them? That would solve the problem once and for all. If they liked him so much, maybe they'd stop getting angry, and he could finally be free to go his own way. Motivated, Haruka decides that this would be the day to begin his search. Meanwhile, at the Lord's mansion, Mariel is worried. Her father is overwhelmed with work, dealing with reports of monsters causing trouble in the region. Trying to calm him, she offers tea, but he insists he can't rest while the city is in danger. At that moment, a guard bursts in with alarming news: a horde of monsters has been spotted near the dungeon. Coincidentally, Haruka encounters the horde on his way. He hadn't expected to fight so soon, but decides this could be a good warm-up. Without hesitation, he faces the monsters with impressive calm. Among them is an orc king, but for Haruka, it's just another obstacle to eliminate. Back in the city, chaos reigns. Mariel rushes to the guild and informs the guildmaster about the horde. The entire guild mobilizes, and the class representative, who is also there, calls her classmates to help defend the city. However, as she looks around, she realizes Haruka is missing. Meanwhile, Haruka finishes the battle with the orcs, easily defeating even the king. He pauses for a moment, surveying the bodies around him. It's strange that so many monsters appeared at once, but he decides not to worry about it for now. With the task done, he continues toward the dungeon. Finally reaching the dungeon, Haruka slips inside, avoiding unnecessary interactions. The interior is impressive, with details that seem straight out of an epic tale. However, he doesn't have time to admire the place. He's on a mission, even if he still doesn't know exactly how to identify the Haram Ray. Wandering through the corridors, he eventually finds a treasure chest strategically placed in the middle of the path. With a glimmer of excitement in his eyes, he opens the chest, already imagining incredible items. But when he uses his appraisal skill, everything falls apart. To check the status of the items, Haruka discovers that everything inside the chest is, bluntly, trash. Frustrated, he continues exploring the dungeon, but luck doesn't seem to be on his side. Each new chest he finds only deepens his disappointment, with more and more useless junk. Eventually, he sighs and accepts defeat, finding the Haram Ray alone would be impossible. With that, he decides to seek out the strange merchant as soon as he returns to the city. Maybe the man has some leads. Back in the city, tension is in the air. The guild and adventurers have been waiting for hours at the main gate, prepared for an epic battle against the supposed horde of orcs. Slowly, exhaustion and doubt begin to set in, and even Mariel feels the judging stares around her. That's when, through the smoke, an unexpected figure emerges. Weapons are raised, hearts race, until they realize it's just Haruka, yawning as he returns from a long day of adventuring. Confused by the scene, Haruka looks around at the crowd, not understanding why everyone seems so tense. The class representative runs up to him, visibly exasperated, and asks where he's been while the city faced an imminent threat. Haruka can't exactly admit that he was out searching for an artifact to manipulate people, so he just remains silent, waiting for her to tire herself out. Gatch, one of the adventurers, interrupts, "Did you see any orcs on your way here?" Haruka, only then, casually remembers having wiped out an entire horde of orcs earlier. The revelation causes a mix of relief and irritation among the crowd. While the guildmaster and Mariel thank him for his bravery, both scold him harshly for taking on so many monsters alone. The guildmaster explains that the increasing monster activity could be a sign of a dungeon stampede, a catastrophic event that could devastate the city. He demands that Haruka promise not to act so recklessly again. Haruka simply nods, eager to escape the conversation as quickly as possible. Later, in the silence of his room, Haruka reflects on the chaotic day. With the guildmaster and Mariel now keeping an eye on him, his plans to slip out of the city unnoticed are becoming increasingly complicated. The next day, he decides to visit the magical item merchant. Upon entering the shop, he notices the merchant isn't exactly thrilled to see him, but Haruka assures him he's not there to buy anything, just to ask a question. "Do you know where to find the Haram Ray?" The merchant raises an eyebrow, confused, and replies that he's never heard of such an item. However, he does mention the Ring, an artifact that drastically boosts the charisma of its wearer. This sounds perfect to Haruka. Curious, he asks where he might find the ring. The merchant explains that items of that caliber wouldn't be on the dungeon's first floor, as they'd already have been looted. Most likely, the ring is located between the 50th and 100th floors, an area unexplored by any adventurer. Haruka considers the challenge of descending that far. Defeating the bosses on each floor would be inevitable. Before he leaves, the merchant advises him to stock up on potions and healing items to survive the journey. As Haruka prepares for the dungeon, the nerds, who overheard the entire conversation, rush to inform the class representative. Upon learning about the ring, she and the other girls are alarmed. The idea of Haruka using an artifact to charm them is unbearable. Determined to stop him, they decide to follow him. Soon after, Haruka notices he's being tailed. He turns around, only to find the class representative and several classmates behind him. Trying to get out of the situation, he fabricates a story, claiming he's after the tree ring, an item that lets you talk to animals. Of course, no one believes him. Losing patience, Haruka flees, with the group quickly giving chase. During the pursuit, the class representative yells, "It's dangerous to run in the dungeon. You could trigger a trap." Haruka casually responds that traps don't affect him, thanks to his maxed out luck stat. But the dungeon's precarious structure doesn't share the same humor. As he leans against the wall, it collapses, sending Haruka tumbling into a dark abyss. The class representative tries to grab him, but it's too late. While falling, Haruka finally remembers he has the airwalk ability. However, by the time he decides to use it, it's already too late. Seeing the ground rapidly approaching, he casts earth magic to create a cushion and lands safely. As he regains his composure, he realizes he must have fallen straight to the 100th floor. But upon further exploration, he discovers something even more unusual. He's on the 101st floor, a secret level. Before him lies a massive, ominous chamber housing the final boss, the Dungeon Emperor, a level 100 Lich. Meanwhile, Haruka's group reaches the 47th floor. With no sign of him, they fear he's in danger but continue their descent, determined to find him. In the secret chamber, Haruka faces the Emperor, who rises imposingly. He tries to use his appraisal skill, but the Lich's stats are hidden, a clear sign that this battle will be unlike any other. Resolute, Haruka launches a surprise attack, but the Lich blocks it with ease and counters with its black blade. For the first time in a long while, Haruka feels he's up against a true challenge. Outside the dungeon, Marielle and her father gaze at the darkened sky, where heavy, foreboding clouds gather like a harbinger of tragedy. They know, with an unsettling certainty, that something terrible is about to happen. Marielle's father looks at her urgently and instructs her to go to the guild immediately, ordering her to alert everyone to prepare for whatever is coming. Meanwhile, deep within the dungeon, Haruka finds himself locked in a desperate battle against the Dungeon Emperor, whose godlike speed puts him in a crushingly dominant position. Determined to turn the tide, Haruka gathers all his strength and activates every speed-enhancing skill he possesses. He begins running circles around the Emperor, moving like a blur. Even so, his attacks remain insufficient, always a step behind. The pressure is unbearable, and every attack he narrowly avoids brings him closer to the brink. Haruka attacks relentlessly, adjusting his strategy with each move. Still, nothing works. His strikes are frustratingly ineffective, while the Emperor's attacks come within millimeters of hitting him. His stamina, however, is rapidly depleting. Every step, every swing drains his energy. He knows he can't keep this up for much longer. At the peak of despair, Haruka's magical contact lenses unlock a new ability, Foresight. He begins to see flashes of the future, glimpses of the Emperor's moves before they happen. The ability is powerful but cruel. Even with the warnings, he knows letting his guard down for an instant will mean death. Haruka resolves to fight as if his life depends on it, because it truly does. After a long and grueling battle, Haruka notices something disconcerting. Despite the life-or-death tension, he's starting to enjoy himself. But his body disagrees. His knees give out, and his breathing becomes labored. He's drained, out of magical energy, and nearly out of physical strength. Meanwhile, the Emperor looks like he's just getting started. Haruka tries to force himself to stand, but he can barely move. He knows that if the Emperor attacks now, it's over. But the attack never comes. From the start, Haruka suspected that the Dungeon Emperor wasn't a typical enemy. Now, he's certain. There's no bloodlust emanating from him, nothing to indicate he's fighting of his own will. The Emperor has been holding back the entire time. This revelation infuriates Haruka. He charges at the Emperor in a final, desperate effort but is outmatched in speed. Before he knows it, a sword is at his neck. The Emperor could kill him. The blade is perfectly poised. But he doesn't. Haruka, confused, notices something strange, a dense, sinister concentration of miasma swirling around the Emperor. It's as if the miasma itself is forcing him to fight. Recognizing this, Haruka's staff begins to glow brightly, absorbing the miasma as he moves closer to the Emperor. Without fully understanding how or why his staff possesses this ability, Haruka decides to use it. He attacks again, this time with the goal of freeing the Emperor. With each strike, the miasma is drained until, finally, the sinister presence vanishes. The Emperor lowers his sword and stands still. Haruka realizes he was right. The Emperor was a victim, forced to fight against his will, desiring only liberation. This was why he didn't finish the battle, even when he had the chance. But the fight is far from over. Residual miasma lingers in the air, and Haruka knows it's only a matter of time before the Emperor is overtaken by darkness again. He considers ending the Emperor's suffering once and for all, but can't bring himself to do it. Instead, in an unexpected gesture of empathy, Haruka embraces the Emperor. It's an act of pure compassion, acknowledging the pain and torment he must have endured. Coincidentally, this gesture activates Haruka's subjugation ability. He hadn't planned it, but the Emperor is now under his control. And finally, something aligns within the chaos. For a brief moment, there is peace. One cannot be consumed by darkness if already under Haruka's control. Even so, he cannot decipher what's on the Emperor's mind, now subdued. Disturbed by the silence, Haruka decides to ask directly, is she angry that he subdued her? Angelica, the dungeon emperor, shakes her head, indicating she doesn't mind. A wave of relief washes over Haruka at this, and the confirmation that she understands his words brings an unexpected sense of calm. Communication between them seems viable, easing one of his biggest concerns. With the tension softened, Haruka decides to check the Emperor's status. His curiosity quickly turns to shock. Her level has been reset to a mere level 1. Apparently, a side effect of the subjugation. Furthermore, for the first time, Haruka can see the Emperor's true name. She is called Angelica. The name brings yet another, more unsettling revelation for Haruka. He realizes, stunned, that the fearsome dungeon emperor is, in fact, a girl. He panics. What will he tell the class representative when she finds out he subdued a girl? Though worried, he decides to deal with that problem later. Trying to stay focused, Haruka asks Angelica if she would like to leave the dungeon with him. Without hesitation, she agrees. Together, they pass through the door and reach the 100th floor. Haruka, cautious, activates his spatial perception ability to scan the area and quickly locates a staircase at the edge of the room, seemingly the final exit. But the tranquility doesn't last. As they step into the center of the room, a massive presence emerges. The floor boss, a towering living armor, appears with clearly murderous intent. Haruka, exhausted from his battle with Angelica, feels the weight of the situation. He knows he only survived because Angelica didn't try to kill him. Now, faced with this new enemy, despair threatens to overwhelm him. He needs a plan fast. Then, a bold idea strikes him. Haruka uses earth magic on the ceiling, causing part of it to collapse onto the living armor. He plans to use his air-walking ability to climb through the hole and escape, but before he can act, 2 giant minotaurs appear. Their gaze is filled with pure hatred. Haruka analyzes their stats and feels a chill. Both are level 99. The situation has just gone from bad to worse. The minotaurs leap to attack but end up falling onto the living armor. The impact is devastating, and all 3 monsters lose a significant amount of HP. Seizing the opportunity, Haruka launches consecutive attacks and manages to defeat them. While collecting the magic crystals, he notices Angelica watching the discarded armor intently. He suggests she take it if she wants. Angelica agrees and excitedly dons the armor. Initially, it appears bulky and awkward, but it soon begins to glow and adjusts perfectly to her frame. Haruka feels relieved seeing Angelica's exposed bones now covered. However, his distrust of dungeon items leads him to analyze the armor. The result worries him. It's cursed, bearing the curse of permanence. Angelica will never be able to remove it. She glares at him, visibly annoyed that he didn't warn her beforehand, but with a resigned tone, she admits that, being a skeleton, she didn't have many clothing options anyway. Meanwhile, on the 50th floor, Haruka's classmates continue their desperate search for him. Many have already lost hope, convinced he'll reappear out of nowhere, as usual, with a casual smile. claiming he cleared the entire dungeon alone. Despite the general disbelief, the class representative refuses to give up. Determined, she leads the group to the boss room. However, when they open the door, they are greeted by a terrifying sight, a giant cyclops, ready to crush them. Back in the city, Marielle reaches the guild and urgently informs the guild master about the strange occurrences in the dungeon. Although she isn't sure exactly what's happening, she senses that something big is about to spiral out of control. Initially skeptical, the guild master reminds her that the guard at the entrance is notoriously negligent. With that in mind, he orders everyone to prepare for the worst. On the 98th floor, Haruka tries to ease the tense atmosphere with Angelica, offering her a cape to complement her new armor. The gesture seems to cheer her up. But the calm is shattered by a dark presence. Haruka activates his analysis ability and identifies the enemy, a lich. Immune to physical attacks, it poses a serious threat. Haruka doesn't know holy magic, the lich's natural weakness, but decides to rely on his staff, which has already proven effective against miasma. Cautiously, he attacks the lich, poking it repeatedly until the monster disintegrates. Though he doesn't fully understand how he won, Haruka accepts the victory and presses on with Angelica, ready for the next challenge. And when they reach the 97th floor, they come across a swarm of venomous moth monsters. Haruka doesn't want to face them directly, as the venom would probably be fatal. So, he decides to act smart. He creates a massive fireball to lure all the moths in and then reduces them to ashes. They proceed to the 95th floor, where this time they face venomous caterpillars that release a sticky, thread-like substance. Getting through this area without getting stepped to the floor would normally be very difficult, but Haruka solves the problem by using earth magic to roll up the ground, crushing the caterpillars in the process. Everything had been going smoothly until now, but when Haruka and Angelica reach the 95th floor, something feels distinctly different compared to the previous floors. Suddenly, they are attacked by the boss of this floor, a living sword. Strangely, instead of being level 95, the sword is level 100. The sword tries to slash Haruka, but he dodges and attempts a counterattack, approaching from behind. Unfortunately, the sword notices him before he can land a hit and moves out of range. Haruka must think of another strategy to defeat it. The sword moves in ways no human could ever match, and, to make matters worse, it has helper swords that attack Haruka from all directions, making it impossible for him to keep up. At that moment, he realizes that someone there might be fast enough to face the monster. Haruka calls Angelica to assist. Excited, Angelica immediately agrees. She draws her sword and starts taking the fight seriously. The monster realizes it's in trouble and gathers all its helper swords in formation to block her attack. But Angelica charges forward effortlessly and slices the monster in half with a single swing. Haruka is shocked to see that Angelica is still so powerful, especially since bosses usually get weaker when they become allies. With their combined strength, he's certain they'll be able to escape this dungeon in no time. Meanwhile, on the 50th floor, Haruka's classmates are desperately fighting for their lives against the Cyclops, but are losing. Several of them are already injured, and one more hit would spell the end. They wonder what Haruka would do in a situation like this. Even though he never gave them good advice, they know Haruka would never give up. Kazaki and Oda come up with a plan that might work. They help the class representative to her feet and explain the details, but she's against the idea because it's extremely dangerous. However, with few options, she eventually agrees. Kazaki positions himself on the front lines to face the Cyclops. Despite its power, the monster is slow, and Kazaki believes his acceleration skills will allow him to get close enough to strike its head. The girls in the class provide cover fire to keep the Cyclops distracted as Kazaki advances. But just as he's about to get within striking range, the Cyclops uses its other hand to swat Kazaki away like a bug. He feels disappointed for failing to land even a single hit, but it was all part of the plan. He was just a decoy to keep the Cyclops distracted while Oda prepared his attack. With Kazaki out of the way, Oda uses his ability to pierce the Cyclops through the eye. Meanwhile, Haruka and Angelica reach the 85th floor, and the boss fights are becoming easier. However, they suddenly feel a tremor throughout the dungeon. It seems like a stampede is about to begin. This was the end of episode 9. Subscribe so you don't miss the next part.